Hola, I'm Gerson Borrero, City and State TV, and today we have really the privilege of talking to someone who, I gotta tell you, no, she doesn't need introduction. Everybody knows her. Maybe some people think too well, but she doesn't shy away from speaking her mind. Christine Quinn, so glad to see you. So glad to see that you're looking great, that you're happy.
Thank you. Yes.
And that you're having fun.
Yes, that I am.
When we spoke the other day, we actually texted each other and how the significance of what this major ruling of equality, of people being treated not because of who they love, but the fact that they love someone able to do it. For Christine Quinn, what has this meant to you?
Well, let me go back a little bit. When the law didn't pass in New York, I was devastated. Did a press conference, I was speaker then, did the thing you're never supposed to do as a woman politician. I started crying in the middle of the press conference.
How horrible.
You're exactly right. And because the thing that got me so upset was the worry that my dad, who's going to be 89 in August, so he was 80 whatever then, Kim's dad, who's 89 now, both our moms are gone, long gone.
Are they both doing okay?
Yeah, they're doing great. They're doing great.
Thank God.
My father's playing golf. Kim's father's going to the gym every day. You and I should be so good. You know what I mean? When we're in our 80s. But when it didn't pass in 2009, I guess it was, I thought, what if it doesn't pass for decades? What if they don't get to go to our wedding? And it was just terrible. Now, it did, thank God, pass, the next year, and we were able to get married, and to have them at our wedding, our whole family at our wedding. And as I wrote recently about, my brother-in-law, who was also gay, got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer the day before our wedding. Just what you don't want. He died that December. We were married in May. But I have these wonderful memories of him there. He had such a great time. At the after party, he presided on this balcony to all the younger gays, telling stories about New York in the 70s and you can imagine. And we all have that. And that's what these rulings mean, that I think the opponents, they don't get the humanity of this. Because marriages and weddings, they're about family, they're about communities, they're about having these moments that you hold on to forever. I have those pictures of him at our wedding forever. And it's not just the love between the two spouses, it's the whole family. So I felt elated when we got this in New York. I described it as a feeling of the state of New York reaching out and giving a collective hug to my community. And I feel now that the Supreme Court has done that in every state, given us a collective hug and said our families are just as good as anybody else's. And I saw a quote recently from Harvey Fierstein, and I'm going to mangle it a little bit, which is that you don't know how big your burden is, how heavy it is, until you lay it down. And that's brilliant.
It is.
Because I don't think I realized, even though I had it in New York, how excluded I felt from America until the Supreme Court made me no longer excluded.
That embrace was not all the 9 justices.
Nope.
There were 4 that remain ignorant, who remain in dark ages. Then they express, surprisingly, they all express the reasons why, which is good. What do you tell those 4 justices in terms of what the United States of America is today and what the world is? What do they have to do to catch up? It isn't that you want to change. Do they understand what they're living?
I don't think they do understand what they're living. I think they're stuck in the past. And I understand for all of us how change is difficult.
Very much so.
It's the unknown. And it's okay to say, I don't understand. Mm-hmm. But to stay stuck in that not understanding, that ignorance, and to stay stuck in the past is just foolish. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they rob themselves of the opportunity to be part of a larger community and a larger moment of love and happiness. And I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them that they can't even try to open their mind up to something bigger than what they were taught.
Prior to arriving here at City and State, I was talking to Michael Johnson, and I was talking to Brian Terry, who's recording this, and we were talking the generational shifts. Michael is 35, Brian is like 23, 24, I'm 24, I'm 64. I have a 17-year-old kid, and I'm laying this out because the question that I want to is go back to your personal experience with your brother-in-law, who obviously you love dearly.
Yeah.
And you miss him.
And he was 18 years my senior.
And he told those stories. What does the Christine Quinn, a modern woman, a very courageous woman, that you led the way among many politicians in a very unique position, that you were set to do great things in political life, and yet you were courageous enough to say, this is me, and you have to accept me. That Christine Quinn, what does it tell a young person who would not be able to understand or probably get tired, with all due respect to your deceased brother-in-law who you loved, who would say, those old stories, I'm tired, and we don't do it like that anymore, we're New Jacks. So a young girl at your age, Christine Quinn, when you were going through what you were going through, what do you tell those young people, or a young man who is all of a sudden say, wow, I like that guy, or I like that girl? What do you tell those young people in terms of understanding what this movement, what this love all means?
Well, I would tell them a number of different things. I mean, one, that, and I hope, and you know, that's the thing. You and I watched the ruling, right? Watch the news, watch the TV, the coverage, Twitter, whatever, and it means one thing to us. But think about the girl you're talking about sitting somewhere, you know, in Kansas or the Midwest or someplace where there isn't a large, visible gay community. And they just now saw the Supreme Court say that who they think they are is okay. So their parents may not say that, their church may not say that, their state may not say that. Because remember, this is marriage, which is different than a human rights protection.
Correct.
But now they can hold on to that. They can hold on to that newspaper article. They can hold on to that news story. And I would tell them to do that and to really hear the highest court in the land and so many legislatures say that LGBT families are just as good and the same as anybody else. So in those moments when you feel like you can't tell anybody, or when you're bullied at school, or picked on in the athletic locker room, remember, so much more of the country and such a higher level of the country is standing with you. But I would also say to them that this didn't happen by accident, and that I wish things were easy in life for people who are from communities that haven't always been well represented or in power. And the LGBT community is just one of those, but they're not. And you have to fight for what you get. And you have to fight for what you want, fight for the victories. And although I want everyone to be unbelievably happy about this decision and grateful, we cannot be satisfied. I worry that people think we won this decision and the legislative victories on marriage just because of the passage of time and younger people. That's not true. People fought for decades and lifetimes. They came out of the closet when it was hard and risky and they could be fired. They fought for domestic partnership, family recognition starting in the 80s and the 90s. All of that, they responded to the AIDS crisis. All of that together is what has changed the laws, but also changed society so younger people feel things differently. I don't want us, and I worry about us walking away from these victories thinking time heals all political wounds. It does not. You have to go out there and achieve the victories that heal the political wounds. And right now, there are people who can get married today and may be fired tomorrow because they were lesbian or gay and got married in a lot of states in this country, and no protections on the federal level.
They can also be thrown out of a lease or
Yes.
any kind of other...
Denied one. And still in New York State, we don't have transgender civil rights in every county. We don't have that state law. So we have more work to do, and I don't want us to think we've won, though we've won so much and so much faster than anybody would ever thought. I mean, I remember fighting about domestic partnerships when David Dinkins and Rudy Giuliani were mayor, but we still have more work to do.
That work that has to, is there a time period? I saw some of the, which was very respectful of the current generation of leaders among the LGBTQ community, elder males and females getting married, allowing them to be the first.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Some of those marriages have lasted more than heterosexual.
Oh, totally.
As a heterosexual, I've had 3 marriages. I'm finally getting married after 22 years. But I've made a lot of mistakes. We do. What happens? What is the game changer that has to occur within the movement in terms of leaving space for these young people who are reaping the benefits of the many sacrifices, the beatings, the killings?
Yeah, literally.
Because, homosexuals have been killed. Lesbians have been abused, have been, all kinds, and I'm talking abuse at all levels, including sexual abuse.
Right.
These young people that now relatively are having, I'm not trying to be an old guy here and what have you, but the reality is it's like practically handed over on a plate. What is their responsibility to deal with the rest of the battles that many of us may not be able to see won?
Well, it's to keep it going in the same way that my generation kept going what people before started. The Stonewall riots in 1969 were a huge beginning, but many of the folks who were there didn't get to, live to the day we're in now, and they passed that on, and people carried it on. So whether it's getting human rights protection laws in every state, a federal LGBT rights law, transgender law, gender as we call it, passed here in New York, whether it's dealing with the reality that tonight there'll be thousands of homeless LGBT young people who sleep on the streets of New York. That's a huge problem in New York and across the country.
And those because they have been thrown out by their parents, mistakenly, because I don't want this kid here.
Or ran away because they just knew it would be terrible, right? And so and many of those young people are forced to end up in, sex work just to support themselves. So that's a battle we have to keep fighting, as well as, making sure that AIDS actually is fully in the rearview mirror. It's better than it was, but it's not gone, although at times we'd like to think it is. And as you mentioned, the violence. One of the things, before I was on the city council, I ran a crime victims assistance agency, the Gay and Lesbian Anti-Violence Project. And one thing we always saw was that when there were great moments of positive things for the community, they were often followed by violent backlash. And interestingly, after Caitlyn Jenner came out, we saw an increase in trans violence, anti-trans violence in the country. So that's an issue we have to take on. And that's not just against LGBT people. Muslim hate crimes are still on the rise in this country. We still too often see anti-Semitic and other hate crimes, and so that's an issue we have to remain vigilant on.
When I get onto the political side, we're going to do another 15 minutes. You're going to allow for your time.
Sure.
We've been trying to talk to you for a long time. But before we get to that, there are 2 politicians I want to mention.
Okay.
The significance of the transformation in thinking that President Barack Obama had, and also Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York State, who people don't realize he comes from a Catholic upbringing, Italian stallion, very male-dominated. Yeah. This is not difficult for these 2 men, and they've been leaders. Tell me about President Obama first.
Well, President Obama attributes most of his evolution to his daughters. Who would come home, and the Obamas, I think, are quite famous in a great way for trying to have dinners together. And they would talk about the kids in their school and the kids who had 2 moms or 2 dads, and kind of probably, pick a little at their dad about why he wasn't with them. And funny story, when I was up lobbying for marriage in Albany a couple of years ago, I'm not going to say the senator's name, I went to see this Republican senator. And he sat down and he said, "You've ruined my life." I said, "Senator, I just met you. How could I ruin?" He said, "I voted no. And every family dinner I've had since then, my wife, my daughter, my son-in-law, they won't let it rest." And I said, "Well, I want to meet your family, and I'm glad I've ruined your life." He voted yes. He was one of the 4 Republicans who voted yes when we got it passed. So there's lots of ways to be an activist. And those Obama girls certainly were, based on the president's own, words. I think you're right. Governor Cuomo comes from a very Italian Catholic family. I come from an Irish Catholic family, so not so different.
Right.
Not the quietest household you've ever been in your life. But the governor's father, Mario, always had a big vision
Yes.
of what was New York. So I think he instilled that in his son, and I think Andrew really saw, when he was Attorney General, the injustice of marriage failing. When he was HUD Secretary, he really addressed, in a way no HUD Secretary had before, housing discrimination against the LGBT community. So I think he came to the position he took very much through firsthand experience of people, what he saw happening to people that was wrong. And that's the significance of people, whether it's a daughter telling her father what her school day is like and who her friends are, or somebody who's been victimized by a landlord telling their truth to a government official. It makes a difference.
We've been talking to Christine Quinn. I'm Gerson Borrero. We're going to come back for part 2. And I'm going to be talking to Christine Quinn, the New Yorker. The New Yorker who now got to this interview. I'm going to out you here. She was on the New York City transit
I
system
was.
on the subway.
I
So you
was.
get. So let's talk about
And it
that.
switched tracks and messed me all
It
up.
messed you up. So you got complaints about the MTA. We'll be right back with Christine in part 2, City and State TV. I'm Gerson Borrero. We'll be right back.